up, YouTube? Welcome back to the Joe McFo Show. Today we're going to be doing part 2 on my series on how to do proper human body proportions, and this time we're going to focus on women. Now I'll let you know up front that I use the same 8-head cannon that I used in the last video, but there's a couple of very key differences that I want you all to recognize, and I think those are going to really play a big role into how you guys design characters and stuff as you go forward. By the way, guys, if there's any particular videos you want to see from me, please comment it down below so I can check it out. There's a ton of art topics out there, and I want to be able to cover all the things that you guys have questions about, so please don't hesitate to share. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that cool stuff if you want to see more content from me. Alright guys, so I'm using the exact same grid that I used in the last video for drawing the ideal proportions for men, but this time I'm just doing the ideal proportions for women. And it's the same 8-head cannon, which is one of the things that I love so much about this. Some people kind of had the impression that because women are often shorter, that there's a difference in the proportions, and I personally don't think that's the case. I think that height can vary on anybody, but you could still have the proportions of an adult individual. So 8-head cannon is for me, at least in the idealized proportions. You can always change things up, and you can always make it so that there's someone who's 7 heads tall or 5 heads tall, or depending on the production that you're working on, maybe there's a whole different system. But the thing about the 8-head cannon is that it's pretty popular already, and it's recognized as something that's pretty valid. So if you're just designing your own stuff, I think this is a great place to start. You guys see me here going about drawing the head the same way I did before. The hairline is where that top line is, and I'm pushing the cranium or the skull just a little bit above that because, like I said in the last video, it's on a completely different plane. And because of this, it also makes it easier for when there's a large hairstyle. So maybe it's an afro, or maybe there's a ponytail, or something that pushes the hair up a little bit. It doesn't confuse you when you're drawing. So just like with men, I will draw the pit of the neck about 1/3 of the way below the chin. And one of the key differences here when I'm drawing a woman's torso is that the rib cage is smaller. It's much less wide than the average man's shoulders are, and that's a key characteristic that I think you guys want to remember, especially depending on who you're drawing. Now, if you're drawing someone who's maybe a female bodybuilder, then that rule might change. Belly button is at the 3-head mark, the crotch is at the 4-head mark, and then before I had the 2-head mark at the nipples, and now I'm just putting those a little bit lower because the breasts tend to sag a little bit. There's some gravity involved, and depending on the anatomy of the model, they'll be higher or lower, but I use the 2-head mark as just a baseline. Now, one other thing I think is really important is how wide you want to make the hips. The hips on a woman's torso are the widest portion of her body. If you take out the arms, the widest part should be at the 4-head mark where the crotch is. And I noticed this after doing figure drawing for such a long time, that never failed. No matter who came in, no matter who I was drawing, that was always the case. So you definitely want to remember that, especially on someone who's more fit. Now, someone may be a little heavy set, that might adjust a little bit, maybe might come lower because of the fat in the legs, but that's basically it. And so then, just like last time, the mid thigh is going to be at the 5-head mark, the knees are going to be at the 6-head mark, lower legs or the bottom of the calf is going to be at the 7 heads, and then the heel is going to be at the 8 heads. And again, guys, remember, whenever you're drawing something like this in a pose that's straight on, the feet are going to stretch forward a little bit because of perspective. So drawing in the feet there, having them push out a little bit further. The wrist comes at the 4-head line at the crotch area. And then one thing that you guys want to know about female anatomy is because of the way the hips are designed, the femur bone or the thigh bone is actually pushed out a little bit further, so it's more angled than you would see on the male anatomy. So that's why you want to draw them at a slightly different angle. I also want you guys to notice that I'm putting significantly less muscle mass on the body overall, and that has to do with the primary hormone that are in women, which is estrogen, while men it's testosterone, and it often allows for less muscle mass to be shown. So in the arms, I'm making them a little smaller. Like I said, the rib cage is a little smaller. She's not a very muscular person. Now, that does not mean that you can't put muscles on a female character. It just depends on the anatomy of your model, how much she works out. But this is something that's very typical, and I imagine you'll see a lot of characters that will look closer to this than the big buff bodybuilder form. And one of the ways that I actually get around the whole muscle problem is I try not to even have that much muscle being shown. So I don't define it by lines as harshly as I would for a man. And something I'm about to do right here, there's always a little bit of a fat pad right underneath the belly button. So I'm just adding that very gently, not anything that I want to pay too much attention to, but it is there. Now I'm switching to doing the side view, so I am lining up all of the main points, so the eyes and the eyebrow, the hairline, the lips, the nipples, and all that kind of stuff, just so I can get a more accurate reading as I do a turnaround. So I think that this is going to be really helpful for you guys, because not only are you seeing the proper proportions, but you're going to see, if you're doing a character turnaround, this is how you usually want to set it up. Typically, when I do a turnaround, I will have a body kind of like this in the pose that I want, and then I will add clothing on top of it. But by doing that, it keeps it very consistent, and maybe one day I'll do a video on that as well, how to do a full body turnaround. Trying to readjust the forms of the face a little bit here. All right, now I'm putting in the pit of the neck. And one thing that I find really helpful is to recognize and remember that a woman's spine or their back is usually a lot more arched, or a lot more flexible than a man's. So that's why you see me push the rib cage a little bit more angled and the pelvis a little bit more angled than I did in my last video. So that's a really key difference there, and if you can remember that, that's going to really help you out a lot. And if a woman is wearing something like high heels or platforms or something like that, or something where her heels are pushed out, then that arch is going to be even more prominent and pushed out. Again, this is what I love about just practicing this way. When you are having a grid like this set up, it really helps, because you start to get practice in all these different angles, and you will almost never have problems doing this again. Half the time you might not even need a reference. I'm not saying that reference is bad, I highly endorse references, but you may not need one all the time, because you'll have studied the anatomy so much and you'll start to get a hang of it. And the heel is going to line up, and I actually miscalculated. I have to readjust, so the heel is going to be placed a little bit further back. And something I said in my last video was that the heel, the butt, and the shoulder all have to line up in order for the back to be balanced, or the figure to be balanced. And the reason that it doesn't appear that way now is because I simply added a little bit more fat to her. So her backside's a little more prominent than I did in my other characters. So that's why you're seeing that. But ordinarily, it would all line up properly. And pushing her neck or her head a little bit forward, because I felt like it just wasn't lining up. And another trick that you guys saw me just do for a split second is I lined up the side of the head, or that space where the ear connects with the jaw. I lined that up with the knee, and I just drew a straight line down. That's another way to tell whether or not your character is balanced, because last thing you want, I assume, is for your character to start looking like Michael Jackson in Smooth Criminal, where they're just leaning forward. Pro tip for you guys, the size of the foot is generally about the size of the forearm, so from the elbow to the wrist. And so if you ever get stuck on that, if you draw on the arm already, you can kind of just use the same type of measurement and you should line up with something like that. So now I'm starting to shift to drawing the back view, and again, the symmetry tool is one of my best friends for this, and it's so simple right now because all I have to do is pretty much just color in the hair. You know, there's nothing really there. I just have to draw that curve on the bottom and it looks kind of like a bell. And then I just have to imagine what the back of the figure would look like. So overlapping the muscles a certain way, I push the armpits out just a little bit more, and then when you're doing it like this, I'm pretty much just going over the same lines that I already drew because the silhouette really doesn't change. There's going to be some things that are different, like which muscles overlap which, and you might see a small little adjustment here or there, but overall it's pretty much the same, which is one of the reasons why I like doing things this way, because it just saves time. Now in art school, if you're drawing traditionally, then you might not have that luxury or that option, but that's what I like about just doing this for practice. You can do it however you want, and as long as you get the material, as long as you understand the information, and as long as you can actually replicate it without needing to use the symmetry tool or kind of semi-tracing over your own work, then I personally don't see much of a problem with it. But I will say that you should get plenty of practice in beforehand. I've drawn the figure for about 11 years now, and I'm just finally starting to feel like, okay, I can probably skip this rule just a little bit, right? It's not something that I try to do all the time, and as I'm getting more experience and stuff, I'm starting to realize how valuable my time is. And sometimes I'm not all that patient. Sometimes I just want to get the job done. And also, like I said before, it's very rare that I even get a chance to draw the figure from the back view straight on like this, or even the front view. It's more common to see a character from a 3/4 view, and that one's the most difficult in my opinion, because you can't just draw half the body like in the side view, or use the symmetry tool that will allow you to skimp on certain things. So again, just to review, the hairline is where I start with the 8-head cannon, and it goes all the way to the chin. The nipples are about a little lower than 2 heads, but again, it depends on the anatomy of your model. Sometimes it's closer to 3 heads. It just depends. The navel or the belly button is at 3 heads. Then 4 is the crotch. 5 is going to be the mid thigh. 6 is the knee. 7 is going to be the lower leg or the bottom of the calf muscle. And then 8 is going to be the heel. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment and tell me what you guys want to see from me on this channel. Peace.